Across the earth lie the remnants of a once thriving spiritual culture. Thousands upon thousands of sacred sites, in all kinds of shapes and forms. Standing stones, dolmens, tumuli, stone circles, even the odd mound or two. A large portion still survive in a crescent area across Western Europe and the British Isles. These monuments were moulded to the surrounding landscape with great sensitivity and painstakingly constructed so that future generations could access a vault of knowledge that lies beyond the limits of the physical world. Although modern historians paint their architects as primitive, few can explain how such primitives were able to erect colossal monuments whose construct modern technology cannot match. And yet, without modern technology, these people cut, dressed, and ferried rocks weighing up to 200 tons across relatively vast distances and challenging terrains. Why did they go to so much trouble? When we dissect the work of the temple builders, we begin to see how their structures are a kind of universal reference library. They encode the mathematics of planetary movements, the dimensions of the Earth, strategic angles for manipulating energy, even sacred geometry. Some temples enhance the effects of sound. Others encode their own latitudinal and longitudinal grid coordinates. Surely, if these were erected to simply honor the gods, as Orthodox history tells us, then why was such information and precision necessary? And why did they choose to encode such knowledge using some of the hardest rocks on Earth? Did they wish to immortalize their genius? Or was there another purpose? What is certain is that many of these so-called pagan temples were so important that they were assimilated by an emerging Roman Catholic Church. One reason lies in the roots of the word church, whose Greek origin, kirkos, means both circle and the house of the Lord. So clearly these spaces were regarded as oracles, places on earth where the connection with other levels of consciousness appear to be more immediate. When we look into the invisible knowledge encoded into sacred sites and the buildings that succeeded them, we discover a subtle science at work, a mechanism that enabled our ancestors to work with subtle energies that permeate the world around us. By looking at the roots of this enigma, we not only gain a new insight into the motivation of the temple builders, we also begin to understand why, for the past 400 years, new circular temples have manifested beside these sacred spaces, the crop circles. These mysterious signatures have attracted hundreds of thousands of pilgrims who travel from near and far to honor their perception of spirit. And just like our ancestors thousands of years ago, they too feel motivated to connect with the invisible universe. Is it possible a relationship exists between all these temples? Are we being reminded of a lost connection with our past that needs to be rekindled? Our journey begins 1600 years ago in southern Europe, as a new force steps into the vacuum of power created by the imploding Roman Empire. The Roman Catholic Church. By 640 AD, this new religion is waging war with Muslims in a bid to assert spiritual control over the peoples of Europe. Its suppression machine is then unleashed on pagans, Celts and Christians, whose beliefs and traditions the Church had previously adopted for its own. The orders sent from Rome to bishops throughout Europe are explicit. Let no Christian place lights at the temples or stone enclosures. Let no one presume to make lustrations, or to enchant herbs, or to make flocks pass through a hollow of a tree or an aperture of the earth. For by so doing, so he seems to consecrate them to the devil. The work of the devil meaning any knowledge pursued outside the strict confines of orthodox belief. Obviously the pagans did not share the Roman Catholic syndicate's view that use of sacred space in any way connected them with the forces of hell, because 300 years later, the clergy was still forbidding pagan worship at sacred sites. The resistance is understandable. Sick people were healed when passed through specially carved granite rocks. Holy wells cured eye deficiencies and other ailments. And fertility was enhanced inside stone circles. For thousands of years, people had benefited from attending sites of veneration. Yet despite such benefits, by the 11th century, worship at sacred sites was made illegal. The penalties for non-compliance were severe. Women who visited standing stones to induce fertility were made to fast for 3 years. Yet despite the slim odds of survival, the orders from Rome met with continued resistance. So the Church adopted a complete change of strategy. It assimilated the pagan sites. Celtic and pagan gods were either discredited or Christianized. Temples formerly dedicated to female deities were rededicated to the Virgin Mary. The horned fertility god, Pan, and the pagan god of living fire, Santan, were twisted into a new and convenient image of fear, Satan. And thus, temples once associated with life-affirming forces came to be associated with a new word, evil. Temples flowing with living energy, symbolized by the dragon, were repackaged with the violent image of the dragon speared by a gallant St. Michael, the former Michael, pagan archangel of light. These were subtle reminders by the new law that forces of nature, once used for the benefit of humanity, were now subjugated and under the control of a middleman. Despite the abundance of empty land, the Church was curiously adamant on acquiring the old temples and erecting its own houses of the holy upon them. One reason is that initiates of the ancient mysteries within the Church were well aware that these temples were special. They were not located haphazardly on the landscape, but sat upon strategic points of energy. The clues survive in the language of the buildings themselves. We approach via the entrance. But what exactly is it entrancing? That passageway called the nave, which in Latin is navis, a boat, transports you to the focal point of worship, the altar. But who or what is it altering? Curiously, most church altars were built over a slab of red granite, a rock containing a very high amount of quartz, a formidable conductor of energy. The same technique was used in the focal point of power in temples such as the Great Pyramid of Giza. Interestingly, the rock used for altars was not of local origin. As with the greenstone altar at Stonehenge, it was transported from hundreds of miles away. So it is strange that a religion hell-bent on eradicating any connection with the pagan past should use the exact principles once adopted by the megalithic temple builders. The assimilation of ancient temples continued into the 12th century, and with them the suppression of esoteric knowledge. Then, out of nowhere, emerged a new kid on the block. Colossal, ornate, impressive, and very, very expensive, the Gothic cathedrals appeared virtually overnight across Europe, blossoming like roses across the bleak landscape of the Dark Ages. And all this at a time when war, pestilence, and plague were decimating much of the continent. Under such conditions, if you had any sense, you'd get a job working on one of these medieval skyscrapers, which employed the finest craftsmen of the day and took as many as 20 years to build. But who in their right minds would invest such an obscene amount of money under such unfavorable economic and social conditions? These optimists, it turns out, were none other than the Knights Templars. The original Templars were adepts of the Egyptian mystery schools. These academies imparted to their pupils the knowledge and practical application of esoteric sciences, such as sacred geometry, the creative effects of sound, and most important of all, the harnessing of subtle energies. But the Templars would not divulge these secrets to those who had every intention of misusing such information, particularly Philip IV of France and Pope Clement V, who coveted the secret knowledge the Templars had guarded. The order was ruthlessly persecuted by the Holy Inquisition, and many took their secret science to the grave. But since the knowledge had to be preserved for future generations, the Templars had devised a cunning plan. They placed the information where the clergy was least likely to find it, right in their very own homes. In designing these hymns to the Supreme Being, the Templars encoded much of their knowledge in the very fabric of the Gothic cathedrals. Their dimensions and spatial relationships are encoded with sacred geometry, and such harmonics produce a concordant effect on the human body because it too is made of similar geometric relationships. A secret formula was used for stained glass, which altered the light of the sun so that the body's skin resistivity to light was subtly altered during the act of prayer. Energy pathways through the building were marked by dragons and other symbolic metaphors, just as Neolithic people had once done in their temples. The floor plans were measured in mathematical units derived from natural laws, and in precise ratio to ancient sacred sites. As for the orientation of the buildings, not only did they reference the old temples, they also aligned to the rising sun at the equinox, when solar energy was at its most powerful. Even the cloisters were designed to carry a subtle alternating electrical current, male and female in polarity. The clues lie in the design of the arches. 5, the pentagram, is associated with feminine or negative polarity, and 6, the hexagram, male or positive polarity. Consequently, an initiate walking the cloisters would effectively open his body's alternating electrical circuit in preparation for receiving the beneficial energies congregating at the altar, a technology once employed in Egyptian temples. Construction of the buildings was overseen by Freemasons, adepts who understood the effects of sound. Their name, maçon, means sound of Mother Earth. Like the Templars, the Masons' craft originates from the Egyptian mystery schools. Not surprising then that they were employed to manifest the Knights' sacred blueprints. The materials were carefully chosen. Limestone, a rock associated with water and the properties of female energy, and granite, a firestone with male energy. Consequently, the buildings are charged with positive and negative polarity, just like an electrical circuit. It is not by accident that such techniques are identical to those used in pyramids and Neolithic stone chambers, whose geometric and electromagnetic properties are also known to affect the human body. Cathedrals such as those at Lichfield and Chartres were built with two unequal spires, each encoding the mathematics of the moon, the female principle, and the sun, the male principle. By their very nature, the spires create two slightly different axes, which in turn generate a vibrato effect on the resonance inside the cathedral. This creates an interesting effect in the human brain. Since the human brain is electromagnetic, any excitation of surrounding vibration can facilitate the mind towards altered states of awareness. The effect is amplified when a person stands upright in the nave. The crystalline structure of the spine acts as an antenna, facilitating the vibration of sound on the body as it reverberates throughout these purposefully designed buildings. At the time of their construction, Gregorian chant was the preferred style of pop music, and the frequencies inherent in this particular form of music are known to increase human brainwaves by as much as 4,000%. This technique allows the soul to soar beyond the constraints of the physical world and communicate with the invisible universe, what some would call God. So much more than a homage to a religion, Gothic cathedrals and ancient churches are carefully tuned resonant cavities, the ultimate sonic temples. And because many of these buildings were constructed over existing ancient sacred space, the residual energy from centuries of ritual, invocation and healing was now amplified by the sonic and geometric framework of the buildings that superseded them. Hence the assimilation of sacred sites had been much more than a symbolic gesture. Despite all the knowledge and skill that clearly went into the Gothic cathedrals, the builders seemingly overlooked the fact that their creations were built on architecturally unsuitable terrain, water. Or did they? Could water be vital to the overall effect the buildings were designed to generate? Another ingredient in this spiritual technology. The water in holy wells carries a substantially different frequency than ordinary water. In ancient times, a temple would be erected beside a holy well to honor the water and its beneficial properties. One such site survives in England, later superimposed by a fine Gothic cathedral, and appropriately named Wells. In fact, most sacred sites, like the Neolithic mound of Silbury Hill, sit on top of springs or underground watercourses. This conical mound even resembles a coiled spiral, a suggestion that form follows function, drawing and anchoring the energy of the invisible universe. Like the ancient mounds, the water below cathedrals lies barely 4 feet below their flagstone floors. Water is both a conductor of energy and a memory storage device. It can also carry an electromagnetic charge. This is generated by the spiral movement of energy. From spiral comes the word spire, and so it is not by chance that spires are located above the focal point of the watercourses they stand upon. Spiral motion is nature's most efficient movement of energy. We are reminded of it every day, even in the heavens. This motion is so fundamental to life that without it, blood could not move through the veins of the body. Our ancestors were well aware of the importance of spin, and they carved this understanding in stone chambers throughout the world. Latter-day experiments have shown that sound takes on the form of spirals inside these smoke-filled chambers, particularly at points where the rock carvings appear. Some even resemble the waves on a modern oscilloscope. It's as if our predecessors left the instructions in the stone. These chambers were also built to specific geometric ratios and tuned to musical notes. Because sound was instrumental in ceremony, these sacred spaces were essentially built as tuned resonant cavities, just like the Gothic cathedrals 3,000 years later. And the effects on the human mind and body, particularly in healing and heightened states of awareness, are profound. Yet the spiral movement of energy is not restricted to stone chambers and churches, for the spiral is also the foundation of every genuine crop circle, regardless of size. And not just any old spiral, but the mathematical ratio behind every living organism, including the human body, the golden ratio, also known as phi. Could the crop circles be harnessing these same natural laws? Seen three-dimensionally, the spiral takes on the shape of a donut. This primary movement in the generation of matter underlies the structure of molecules, and if you were to slice it like an orange, it would look something like this. The largest expressions of spiral energy are those largest of molecules, the planets. In ancient times, the planets were honored as living beings, each attributed with specific vibrations and functions. The Greeks called them acousmata, the acoustic ones, demonstrating how sound was also understood to be a fundamental creative force. In their study of the planets, the ancients noticed something else: how an invisible glue enabled each of the planets to relate to one another in a harmonious way. When they calculated the mean orbits of the planets, they realized this order was based on orderly geometric relationships. And they called it sacred geometry, for it indeed reflected the order of the world of the gods. The ancients deduced that to bring the harmony of the heavenly machinery of the gods into the physical world was to anchor on earth the benefits that came with an orderly universe. The Egyptians were masters of this craft, encoding sacred geometry throughout their temples. Each sacred site was designed to create specific resonant environments. Some were used for healing, others for altered states of awareness, even the manifestation of energy itself. But they also built their temples according to the proportions found in the golden ratio, that rhythm common to all living things. The primary purpose of connecting with the invisible universe was to access a kind of astral reference library. In this way, information was received for the benefit of the tribe, or for one's own spiritual development. And by working with rather than against natural forces, it was possible to gain greater insight into the mechanics of the universe. Before construction was begun, the temple builders chose a suitable location, a special place where subtle energies snaked across the landscape, energies whose invisible pathways crisscrossed the entire globe, even to this day. At the point of intersection, called the node, was placed the most important part of the temple, the altar. The siting of sacred space on nodes of energy has been taking place throughout the world since at least 8000 BC, and its architects also left us some clues. Weighing as much as 200 tons and moved hundreds of miles across difficult terrain, standing stones stand where they are for a very, very good reason. Throughout the Iberian Peninsula, standing stones go by various names. Anta, from annotare, meaning to mark or locate. So, just like an entrance or an altar, what exactly are they marking? The stone needles go by the name Betilu, whose Semitic origin, Beth-El, means house of God, hence Bethlehem, a striking similarity to the origin of church, which derives from kirkos and means circle and house of the Lord. Like the Freemasons, the Neolithic architects were very fussy about their choice of rock, and whether granite, dolerite or schist, the material contained a very high content of quartz, the raw material used in today's computers. In other words, the rocks were both conductors and storage devices of energy. They were erected throughout the world by the thousand and programmed by master craftsmen as antennas for tuning in to the invisible universe. Modern dowsers have discovered how these stones, indeed all sacred spaces, mark the crossroads of invisible yet measurable pathways of magnetic energy. Dowsing is one of the most ancient of crafts. It has even been used with great success by the military to locate missing submarines, and oil companies have employed dowsers to locate underground deposits of oil. So clearly something works. Because of the stone's positioning along these pathways of energy, magnetic anomalies are frequent at these locations, and they often interfere with electrical equipment and compasses. There have even been reports of missing time, which may be a distortion of the local gravitational field. These stones also produce ultrasonic frequencies. Such frequencies above the human hearing range are today used in hospitals to heal the sick. What is significant is that both ultrasound and electromagnetism, particularly at very high frequencies, can influence brainwaves, which facilitates heightened states of awareness. Since the ancient temples have rich traditions of healing and altered states, we can begin to appreciate why people went to a lot of trouble to erect these stones, and why they resisted all attempts to outlaw their use. But there's another surprise. Dowsing maps of sacred sites reveal that the energy also radiates like ripples, and the relationship of these ripples is expressed in the same organized geometric forms found in the relationship of the orbits of planets, sacred geometry. Since this geometry is inherent in the design of churches and Gothic cathedrals, and many stand upon ancient sacred sites, we can now see how these places of worship stand upon the same crossroads of energy. It gives their cruciform shape a whole new meaning. The very position of the walls, the chambers, and most importantly, the entrances, were designed to harness the invisible energy pathways flowing through the land. The meandering lines of energy converge at the ultimate focus of worship, that very power spot once occupied by an ancient mound or standing stone, the altar. Magnetism, water, geometry, and sound. All these systems combined to create an environment that influences that most finely tuned resonant cavity of all, the human body. Creating an ambient environment of sympathetic resonance, the temple builders facilitated a better connection with the unseen worlds. For when the physical body is in close contact with spirit, it is essentially whole. Or in the context of the space where they stand, they are indeed holy. As we have seen, sacred space takes on many forms and functions. These stairways to heaven harness a combination of natural laws that elevate our state of being. Recently, a new kind of temple has appeared in the landscape. Although they gained prominence in the media during the late 1980s, the crop circles can be traced back to 1680. Written records of the time describe events of uncanny similarity to the latter-day phenomenon. Even in 1890, eyewitnesses saw the mysterious circles manifest in a matter of seconds, just as others have done in the modern era. In genuine crop circles, the plants are bent just above the soil without damage, an incredible feat when it occurs in the thick and brittle stems of maize or canola. There is a superficial charring of the stems, and the soil inside the circles can be bone dry, while outside it remains wet, suggesting that an intense heat is used in the process. Under the microscope, the affected plants show how their chromosomes have been altered. Soil samples too reveal an energy that generated temperatures in excess of 500 degrees Celsius in a fraction of a second. This was enough to alter the soil's crystalline structure. Such effects can be generated by the controlled use of ultrasonic frequencies, the kind of frequencies measured at standing stones and stone circles. There have even been sightings of unusual balls of light in and around crop circles, just like the ones often described in folklore, which appear at oracles and other sacred spaces. Clearly, such evidence points away from humans as the originators of the crop circles. Like churches, cathedrals, and other sacred spaces, crop circles have a rich history of people experiencing heightened states of awareness. There are hundreds of cases of healings. One person experienced the complete disappearance of a malignant eye tumor after contact with the designs. Perhaps the geometry is causing such effects. As with any sacred space, crop circles often conceal an invisible network of encoded geometry, and such shapes resonate with the human body, even its state of awareness. In nature, geometry is the physical manifestation of energy. In the mid-1990s, it was discovered that around the perimeter of crop circles there exists an energy field, a kind of shielding device, and its frequency registers in the millions of vibrations per second. In fact, it seems to occupy a range between 260 to 320 megahertz. It has also been noted that the crop circles, like their stone predecessors, are not only appearing at the crossroads of invisible yet measurable pathways of magnetic energy, but these pathways are connected to local sacred sites. And just like the ripples of energy that vibrate around standing stones, the crop circles too generate their own organized energy fields. Such energy fields are invisible harmonic extensions of the physical design, and the spatial arrangement of these ripples is consistent with the principles of sacred geometry. In other words, the crop circles are living organisms, physical expressions of living energy. But what type of energy? Throughout this journey, we have discovered how sound was a main element of the spiritual technology of the ancients. In fact, it is the one fundamental principle on which all religions agree: sound as a prime creative force. Sound drives molecules in their frantic spin. It is inherent in the ratios of the orbits of the planets. It can even bring down the walls of Jericho. In crop circles, the clues constantly point to sound as a source. These come in various guises, such as a dowsing energy map around the crop circle. In this case, the relationship between the physical design and its surrounding energy field is defined by an equilateral triangle, a 3:1 ratio, which in musical terms is a double octave. Sometimes the clues lie in the shapes themselves. Here, the stems are bent 6 inches from the top, creating the unmistakable shape of a cymatic pattern. Cymatics is the study of sound as it interacts with physical substances. Its most famous recent pupil was the Swiss scientist Hans Jenny, whose experiments throughout the 1960s demonstrate how the energy of sound physicalizes in geometric shapes. In a sense, he helped humanity to visualize frozen music. Low frequencies created simple circles and rings. But when the frequencies rose or combined, so the complexity of the shapes increased. Interestingly, this is exactly what is now occurring in fields around the world. Simple crop circles in the early 1980s gave way to new and increasingly complex designs. And as with laboratory experiments, the frequencies detected inside crop circles are rising relative to the complexity of their design. Sound can have a profound effect on the human body, and so too can crop circles. This is because all the atoms in the human body are in a constant state of vibration. Consequently, both the body and brain waves can be influenced by any excitation of the local energy field they interact with, exactly as we find in a Gothic cathedral or a stone chamber. The human body contains a range of frequencies, and amid this range there is a gap, a place where the body appears to be silent. This range occurs between 260 to 300 megahertz, and it is the same range predominant in crop circles. Given that more and more people are experiencing heightened states of awareness in crop circles, could these patterns be the new sacred spaces? We are, after all, electromagnetic beings, and the magnetic field in crop circles is known to deviate by several degrees. The effect sometimes makes the plant's roots flow horizontally instead of vertically. If such a concept seems speculative, consider that when this unusual crop circle appeared in 1991, the breaks along the snaking pattern were found to match the strategic breaks in human DNA which are unused or waiting to be coded. Could it be that these new temples are waking something in our genetic memory? The concept of crop circles as an input of energy into the Earth itself also seems feasible when they manifest upon the node of the Earth's magnetic pathways of energy, once again mimicking the way our ancestors located and built the altars of their temples. Just how much of an effect the crop circles are having on the Earth and human consciousness remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: like sacred spaces, all crop circles share a relationship with water. They manifest over or near large sources of underground water, and after their appearance, the local soil is depleted of millions of gallons, as seen in this infrared image. This may be an indicator of the intense heat generated by sound frequencies below the human hearing range. Since crop circles are founded on the spiral, and spin generates an electromagnetic field in water, it is worth pointing out that such a process can imprint information in water. and samples taken from crop circles show that the water has indeed been coded. Water is capable of storing memory, even when the original coding is diluted millions of times. This has serious implications, because 90% of the world's crop circles appear across southern England and above the world's deepest chalk aquifer. If the crop circles are coding the water, the information is filtering into the aquifer, into the streams, the rivers, the seas, and ultimately the oceans. And since the oceans occupy 2/3 of the body of the planet, consider how they might be transforming the human body, which itself is also 2/3 water. By locating an appropriate spot on the landscape where lines of magnetic energy cross, it is possible to create a temple, an environment where one can connect with subtle forces which are fundamental in our lives. Add sacred geometry, sound and stone, and you create a sympathetic effect on the human body and its state of awareness. This art, this practical magic, was utilized by our ancestors and later preserved in the very fabric of churches and cathedrals. And now, with the appearance of crop circles, we are reminded once again of this universal legacy. With some degree of prophetic vision, those who came before us sensed that knowledge from the world of spirit would be useful in guiding future generations, in days when our connection to the sacred and the unseen would become tenuous. Unlike many of us today, they shared an intimate relationship with the natural world, and as such understood its laws and how to harness them. They left behind these laws the times when we would undergo tumultuous change. Perhaps the time has come to honor the elegant heirlooms they left behind.